I stood frozen in the corner of our backyard as my dad lifted his champagne glass during my brother Jake's graduation party. "To my son," he announced, his voice carrying across our manicured lawn. "Some kids make you proud. Others just take up space." Everyone laughed. I caught my mom glancing nervously at me. Jake looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I smiled brightly and said, "Good thing I just got my own place 2,000 miles away." "Dad, you will never have to worry about me taking up space again." The silence after my announcement was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. My father lowered his glass slowly, his jaw tightening the way it always did when I disappointed him, which was often. My mother rushed over with a plate of appetizers, desperately trying to change the subject. Jake stared at his shoes. The other guests suddenly became very interested in their drinks. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled with black marker. 26 years of existence reduced to whether things belonged in keep, donate, or trash. Most of my childhood trophies and awards were already in the donate pile, not because I didn't value them, but because they weren't the right kind of achievements in my father's eyes. Frank Porter built his construction company from scratch. He started with a single truck and now owned one of the most successful businesses in our Pennsylvania town. His story was legendary at family gatherings, how he worked 16-hour days, never took vacations, and built an empire through pure grit and intelligence. The unspoken message was always clear. This is what success looks like. My brother Jake was the natural heir to this legacy. From the time he could walk, he showed all the qualities my father valued: athletic, practical, good with numbers, and charismatic in exactly the right way. When Jake decided to study business at our state university, my father beamed with pride for weeks. When he joined the football team, my father never missed a game, even rescheduling important client meetings. I was different from the beginning. While Jake built structures with his blocks, I used mine to create patterns and designs. When he joined Little League, I asked for art classes. My middle school art teacher, Mrs. Henderson, called my parents in for a conference when I was 12 to tell them I had real talent, that I should be enrolled in specialized programs. My mother nodded enthusiastically. My father checked his watch every 5 minutes. "That's wonderful," he said when we got home. "Hobbies are important for, well, rounded development." That was his word for anything that wouldn't lead directly to financial success. Hobbies. My watercolors that won regional competitions? A nice hobby. My graphic design work that got featured in a statewide high school showcase? A creative hobby that would look good on college applications for business school. I didn't go to business school. I majored in graphic design at a state college, paying my own way with scholarships and part-time jobs. When I graduated with honors, my father's only comment was, "At least you finished. Now it's time to get a real job." I was stacking my portfolio cases when I found the old family photo albums my mother had asked me to take with me since you're the sentimental one. I hadn't opened them in years. Inside were the usual awkward school photos, vacation snapshots, and holiday gatherings. I flipped through idly until I reached a section from before I was born. There was my father, looking younger but with the same determined expression. And next to him in several photos was a young woman who looked startlingly like me. Same wavy dark hair, same wide, set eyes, same slight build. On the back of one photo was written Frank and Elaine, summer 1985. I stared at it in confusion. I had no Aunt Elaine. My father had a brother, Uncle Thomas, who lived in Florida, but I'd never heard of a sister. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. "Who's Elaine?" I asked without preamble when she answered. The long pause told me everything. "Where did you find that name?" "In the old photo albums. She looks just like me." My mother sighed. "That's your father's sister. They haven't spoken in decades." "I have an aunt I've never heard about? Why?" Another long pause. "She was an artist. Quite talented, actually. She chose her art over the family business. Your grandfather never forgave her. And your father. Well, he sided with your grandfather." The pieces clicked together so fast it made me dizzy. My father's resistance to my artistic interests, his dismissal of my achievements, his constant comparisons to Jake, it wasn't just that I didn't fit his idea of success. I reminded him of someone he'd chosen to erase from his life. "What happened to her?" I asked. "I don't know," my mother admitted. "Her name became forbidden in the house. Your father refused to discuss her. Last I heard years ago, she was somewhere on the West Coast." I looked again at the photo, at the woman whose existence had been erased, but whose shadow had somehow shaped my entire life. "Is she why Dad hates everything I do?" "Your father doesn't hate what you do, Gabriella," my mother said automatically, the way she always defended him. Then she sighed. "But yes, I think it scares him. He saw his sister struggle financially. Artists don't have stable incomes, security. He wants security for you. By making me feel worthless?" "He doesn't mean to do that," she said weakly. But he did. And suddenly, my decision to move across the country felt even more right. The Seattle job opportunity came through Amy, my best friend since college. She'd moved there 2 years ago and now worked for a mid-sized graphic design firm that specialized in corporate branding and environmental graphics. "They're expanding and looking for someone with your skills," she told me over the phone 3 months ago. "The pay isn't amazing to start, but the creative director is incredible." "You'd learn so much, Gabs." I applied that night, not telling anyone in my family. When I was called for a video interview, I took a personal day from my dead-end administrative assistant job and drove to a coffee shop 2 towns over, paranoid that someone might see me and word would get back to my father. The interview went well, so well that they asked for a second one the following week with the entire creative team. I began secretly preparing my portfolio, updating projects late at night, and researching everything I could about Seattle. I calculated costs, made spreadsheets of potential apartments, and mapped out neighborhoods on my lunch breaks. Amy helped me prepare, sending links to housing options and insider information about the company culture. "They're going to love you," she assured me. "Just be yourself, your real self, not the version your dad tries to make you be." The second interview was even better than the first. The creative director, Laurel Wilson, seemed genuinely impressed with my portfolio and asked insightful questions that showed she'd really looked at my work. By the end, she was talking about specific projects they had coming up that I might work on. "When could you start?" she asked. I told her I could relocate within a month. She smiled. "Perfect. We'll be in touch very soon." I walked around in a daze for days after that, jumping every time my phone rang. When the call finally came with the official offer, I accepted immediately. The salary was modest but livable, though I quickly discovered that Seattle's housing market was even more brutal than I'd anticipated. "You can crash with me until you find a place," Amy offered, but I was determined to stand on my own 2 feet from day one. My mother found me researching apartments late one night, the glow of my laptop illuminating my bedroom. "What are you still doing up?" she asked, then glanced at my screen. "Seattle? What's in Seattle?" I hadn't planned to tell her yet, but something in her expression, concern without judgment, made me confess everything. The job, the moving plans, my desperate need to get away. To my surprise, instead of trying to talk me out of it, she sat on the edge of my bed and asked questions. Real questions about the company, the position, my plans for housing. And when I finished explaining, she did something I never expected. She reached for my hand. "I think this could be good for you," she said softly. "But please, let me tell your father when the time is right. He'll take it better coming from me." I agreed, though I doubted anything would make my father take it well. The next morning, my brother knocked on my bedroom door. "So Seattle, huh?" Jake said, leaning against my doorframe. "How did you know?" "Mom told me." "Don't worry, I won't say anything to Dad." He came in and sat on my desk chair. "For what it's worth, I think it's brave. Getting away from all this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing our house, our town, our family. "You never seem to mind all this," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Jake looked down. "It's easier when you're the favorite." He glanced up, meeting my eyes. "I've always known, Gabs, how differently he treats us, how unfair it is." "Then why never say anything?" He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "Selfishness, I guess. Fear. I don't know, but I'm sorry." It was the first time Jake had ever acknowledged the dynamic that had shaped our relationship. Part of me wanted to be angry that he'd benefited from my mistreatment for years, but a larger part was just relieved that I wasn't crazy, that someone else saw it too. Help me convince Mom to see a doctor about that cough, I said, changing the subject. She's had it for months. Already on it, Jake said, and I'll check in on them after you go. I felt a weight lift. Not everything was on my shoulders. I could leave without abandoning my mother entirely. Everything was falling into place. The job was secured, Amy was helping me find roommate listings, and I'd booked a flight for the following week. All I needed to do was pack, give notice at my current job, and tell my father. I decided to wait until 3 days before my departure for that last item, minimizing the time he'd have to undermine my confidence. But the night before I planned to accept the offer officially, I discovered I'd forgotten to log out of my personal email on our family computer. As I went to shut it down, I noticed the read status on several critical messages: correspondence with the design firm in Seattle, with Amy about housing, with the airline about my flight. Someone had been reading my emails, and I had a sinking certainty about who it was. That certainty was confirmed when my father walked into the living room, his face tight with controlled anger. "Seattle," he said flatly. "Some design job. Were you planning to mention this at all?" "Yes," I said, my heart racing, after everything was finalized. "And when would that be? The day you left? The week after?" He shook his head. "This is a mistake, Gabriella. That industry is unstable. The cost of living there is outrageous. You'll be back in 6 months, broke, and looking for help. I've calculated everything. I can make it work." He scoffed. "With that starting salary? In that city? Be realistic. I'll have roommates. I've been saving." "Listen to me," he said, his voice softening into what I recognized as his business negotiation tone. "I understand you're feeling underappreciated here. That's my fault. But running across the country isn't the answer." I braced myself for what was coming next. "I know people at Marshall and Reed here in town. They do corporate communications, some design work. I could make a call, get you an interview for something entry level. The pay would be comparable. You'd save on moving costs, and you could find an affordable apartment nearby." And there it was, the offer of help that wasn't help at all, but another form of control. "Stay close, accept that your dreams are impractical. Be grateful for the connections I can offer you. Take the safe, practical path I've chosen for you." "Thank you," I said carefully, "but I've already accepted the Seattle position. I start in 2 weeks. The flash of shock across his face was almost worth the explosion that followed. Seattle greeted me with surprising sunshine my first week, contradicting everything I'd heard about constant Pacific Northwest rain. I took it as a good omen. My new home was a modest 3-bedroom apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, shared with 2 other women in their 20s. Tara worked as a barista while pursuing a nursing degree, and Jess was an environmental scientist for a non-profit focused on Puget Sound conservation. Both were welcoming but busy with their own lives, which suited me perfectly. No pressure, no judgment, just cordial coexistence and occasional shared meals. The apartment was nothing special. Worn carpeting, outdated kitchen, and windows that never quite closed properly. But the rent was manageable, split 3 ways, and I could walk to work. After years of living in my parents' immaculate but sterile house, there was something freeing about the slightly shabby independence of my new home. Northwest Design Collective was housed in a converted warehouse space, with exposed brick walls, gleaming wood floors, and enormous windows. My workspace was a simple desk and an open floor plan, but I had a new computer, a large monitor, and most importantly, colleagues who took design seriously. "We'll start you with some smaller client work," Laurel explained on my first day. "Get you familiar with our processes and clients. If all goes well, you'll be taking on larger projects within a few months." Those first weeks were overwhelming in the best possible way. I absorbed everything I could, staying late to watch the senior designers work, taking notes on client interactions, and volunteering for additional projects. For the first time in my life, my enthusiasm for design wasn't dismissed as a nice hobby but valued as a professional skill. Yet despite the 2,000 miles between us, my father's presence lingered. He called daily in the beginning, his questions always focused on the negative. Was the city as expensive as he'd heard? Was my neighborhood safe? Had I calculated my tax withholdings correctly? Each conversation left me drained and doubting myself. My mother's calls were different, genuinely interested in my new life, though I noticed she only called when my father was at work. Jake texted regularly with silly jokes and encouragement. Neither mentioned my father's anger about my departure. After a particularly rough call with my dad questioning my ability to make rent, I decided to try therapy. The company's health insurance covered 8 sessions annually, and Amy had recommended a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Patel listened to my history with my father and my discovery of my aunt's existence without judgment. "What you're describing sounds like conditional love," she said during our second session. "Your father's approval is based on you meeting certain expectations rather than being accepted for who you are." "But is it wrong for parents to have expectations?" I asked. "He just wants me to be successful." "By whose definition of success?" Dr. Patel asked. The question stayed with me for days. At work, I was assigned to a team redesigning branding materials for a local credit union. The project manager, Diana Morris, was a senior designer in her 40s with an impressive portfolio and a straightforward management style. She pushed me to justify my design choices, questioned my assumptions, and offered criticism that was pointed but never cruel. Under her guidance, my work improved rapidly. "You have good instincts," she told me, after I'd stayed late reworking a concept that wasn't quite landing. "But you guess yourself too much. Trust your initial ideas more." I didn't tell her how difficult it was to trust myself after years of having my ideas dismissed. 6 weeks into my new job, I was called into Laurel's office. My stomach dropped immediately. Had I made a mistake? Was I being let go? "Gabriella," she said when I sat down, her expression unreadable. "I received an interesting call yesterday." "Oh?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "From your father." She watched my reaction carefully. "He said he was checking on your progress, wanting to make sure you were adjusting well." Cold dread washed over me. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea he would contact you." "It was unusual," Laurel said. "We don't typically discuss employee performance with family members, regardless of their concerns." "Of course not. It won't happen again." "Here's the thing," Laurel continued, leaning forward. "He mentioned that you might need extra guidance since this is your first professional design position. He offered some suggestions about the types of projects you might be ready for." The humiliation was complete. My father, who knew nothing about design, had tried to manage my career from across the country. "I'm truly sorry," I said again, fighting tears. Laurel's expression softened. "It's not your fault, Gabriella, but it does raise concerns about professional boundaries. We need to know you're operating independently here." I nodded miserably. "The credit union project you've been working on, we're going to reassign your portion to another designer." "I understand," I whispered, already calculating how quickly my savings would run out when I lost this job. "Instead," Laurel continued, "Diana has requested you for a smaller project she's overseeing for a local arts organization. She thinks your aesthetic would be a good fit." It wasn't a firing. It was a demotion, but also a lifeline. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down." "And Gabriella? If your father calls again, we'll politely remind him of our privacy policies, but you might want to have a conversation with him about professional boundaries." I nodded, knowing such a conversation would be pointless. My father didn't recognize boundaries. He saw them as obstacles to overcome. That night, I called him for the first time since moving to Seattle. "Did you contact my boss?" I demanded without greeting. "I was trying to help," he said, not denying it. "Make sure they recognize your potential. By telling them I need extra guidance? By suggesting what projects I can handle? You're being oversensitive. Networking is how business works. I was establishing a relationship with your supervisor." "You nearly got me fired," I said. "Please don't contact my workplace again." If they'd fire you over a father showing interest in his daughter's career, it's not a company worth working for. The conversation continued in circles, with him refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing and me growing increasingly frustrated. Finally, I said, "I have to go," and hung up before he could respond. I sat on my bed, shaking with anger and something else, fear that perhaps he was right, that I couldn't succeed on my own, that I was being oversensitive. Then I remembered Dr. Patel's question, by whose definition of success? The next day, I threw myself into the arts organization project. It was smaller than the credit union work, with a more limited budget, but Diana gave me significant creative freedom. They need a cohesive visual identity for their youth outreach programs, she explained. Something that appeals to teens, but doesn't feel condescending or trying too hard to be cool. I found myself enjoying the challenge, staying late to sketch concepts and research similar programs. Diana checked in regularly, but let me take the lead. This direction has potential, she said, reviewing my initial concepts. Keep pushing it. Slowly, I began to build a new routine. Work during the day, occasional dinners with Amy or my roommates in the evening, therapy on Thursdays. I explored my new city on weekends, discovering neighborhoods, parks, and cafes where I could sketch. I limited calls with my father to once a week and kept them brief. For a while, it seemed like I might actually be breaking free. 6 months into my Seattle life, the delicate balance I'd established began to falter. It started with small things. A passive, aggressive email from my father with an article about tech layoffs in the Pacific Northwest, a concerned call from my mother about the persistent cough she still hadn't seen a doctor about, an unexpected bill from my student loan servicer. Then Tara lost her barista job when the coffee shop closed suddenly. "I'll find something else," she assured Jess and me as we sat at our small kitchen table. "But I might be late with rent next month while I job hunt." "We can cover you this once," Jess said, though I knew her non-profit salary was as modest as mine. "Absolutely," I agreed, mentally recalculating my budget. I could make it work for 1 month, maybe 2, but not indefinitely. Tara found part-time work at a restaurant within weeks, but her hours were inconsistent, and her income dropped significantly. Our apartment dynamic shifted as financial stress mounted. Small irritations became larger conflicts, dirty dishes left in the sink, utilities usage, grocery sharing. I started spending more time at the office or at Amy's place, avoiding the tension at home. Meanwhile, at work, I was finally gaining traction. The arts organization was thrilled with my design work, and Diana had recommended me for a project with a sustainable clothing brand, a larger client with more visibility and a bigger budget. I threw myself into the new challenge, grateful for the professional momentum even as my personal life grew more complicated. Then my brother Jake called on a rainy Tuesday evening. "Just checking in," he said, his tone too casual. "How's the design world treating you?" "Good. Busy. New client project just started." I hesitated. "Everything okay there?" Jake sighed. "Mostly. Dad's been." "Well, Dad, you know how he gets. What's he done now?" "It's what he's saying to everyone. Extended family, business associates, neighbors, that you're struggling out there, barely making it." My blood ran cold. "What? Why would he say that?" "Because that's what he believes. Or what he wants to believe, that you can't succeed without him. But that's not true. I'm doing well professionally. The housing situation is temporary. I know that. Mom knows that. But Dad's creating this narrative that your art experiment is failing and you're too proud to admit it." "Perfect," I muttered. "Just what I need when I'm trying to establish myself professionally, rumors that I'm a failure." "There's more," Jake said reluctantly. "He's been showing everyone your bank statements." "What? How would he even have those?" "You know that joint account you opened in high school? The one where he deposited your graduation money? You never closed it." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The account had been inactive for years, with just a small balance I'd forgotten about. But as a joint account holder, my father would have access to all my banking information with that institution, including my main checking account. "He's been monitoring all my finances?" The violation felt immense. "And making transfers into your account. Small amounts, regularly. Then telling people he's supporting your Seattle adventure, because you can't make it on your own." The room seemed to tilt. I checked my banking app immediately and saw them, monthly deposits of $200 each, starting shortly after I'd moved. I'd assumed they were some kind of banking reward or interest payment and hadn't questioned them. "I never asked for this money. I never knew about these transfers." "I know," Jake said. "And I've tried telling him to stop, that he's crossing lines, but you know how he gets when he thinks he's right." After we hung up, I called my father, fury overriding my usual avoidance. "Why are you sending me money I never asked for and then telling people I can't support myself?" I demanded when he answered. "Hello to you too, Gabriella," he said calmly. "Is that how you greet your father now?" "Answer the question." "I'm helping my daughter. That's what fathers do." By humiliating me? By making me look dependent when I'm not? $200 a month is hardly keeping you afloat. If you were truly independent, you wouldn't even notice it. I'm closing that account tomorrow. That seems ungrateful, but it's your choice. His tone shifted, becoming more serious. Your landlord seems concerned about the stability of your housing situation. Apparently, one of your roommates is behind on rent. The blood drained from my face. How do you know about Tara? I make it my business to know when my daughter might be at risk. Seattle has a significant homeless population, I understand. Are you threatening to contact my landlord? I'm expressing legitimate concern for your well-being. I ended the call and immediately texted Jess. Did anyone contact our landlord about Tara's late rent? Her response came quickly. Not that I know of. We paid in full last month. Why? I didn't answer, too disturbed by the implications. How had my father gotten this information? Had he somehow found our landlord's contact information from across the country? The level of monitoring felt pathological. The next day, I opened a new account at a different bank and scheduled the closure of all my accounts at the previous institution. I couldn't undo the damage to my reputation with extended family, but I could prevent further financial surveillance. That same week, I was assigned the lead role in presenting our concept work to the sustainable clothing brand. It was my biggest opportunity yet at Northwest Design Collective, a chance to showcase both my design skills and my client communication abilities. I prepared obsessively, rehearsing my presentation during every spare moment. The morning of the presentation, my phone rang with my mother's number. Mom, is everything okay? I asked, checking the time. It was early, even on the East Coast. I finally saw a doctor about that cough, she said, her voice thin. They found something on my lung. I'm having more tests tomorrow. My carefully constructed new life suddenly seemed trivial. What do they think it is? They're not sure yet. Probably nothing. I shouldn't have called and worried you before knowing more. Of course you should have called. Does Dad know? Not yet, she admitted. I wanted to get more information first. Mom. I know. I'll tell him today. But please don't mention it if he calls you. Let me handle it my way. I promised, though reluctantly. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, unable to focus on the day ahead. My mother was ill, possibly seriously. My father was sabotaging my independence from 2,000 miles away. My housing situation was precarious, and in 3 hours, I was supposed to give the most important presentation of my career. Somehow, I made it through the presentation. The clients asked tough questions, but the groundwork Diana and I had laid was solid. They requested some minor revisions, but approved the general direction. It should have been a triumphant day. Instead, I felt hollow. When Diana stopped by my desk afterward to congratulate me, she noticed my distraction. Everything okay? You seemed off during the Q&A? Family stuff, I said vaguely. Nothing I can't handle. If you need to adjust your hours or work remotely for a bit, we can arrange that. Thank you. But that won't be necessary. I forced a smile. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. That evening, I received an email from Diana that she had to take unexpected personal leave for 2 weeks due to a family emergency. The sustainable clothing project would continue with another senior designer temporarily supervising. Without Diana's supportive presence, the workplace felt suddenly hostile. Was it paranoia, or were people watching me more closely? Had my father's interference caused lingering doubts about my abilities? The new supervising designer questioned decisions Diana had already approved, requiring extensive revisions that felt arbitrary. At home, the situation deteriorated further when our landlord announced the building had been sold and would be redeveloped into luxury condominiums. We had 90 days to find new housing in a market with a significant shortage of affordable rentals. We could look for a new place together, Jess suggested, but Tara had already decided to move in with her boyfriend, and Jess was considering a job offer in Tacoma. The fragile community I'd built was splintering, and my professional foothold felt increasingly precarious. That night, I received a text from my father. Heard about your housing situation. I'll be in Seattle next week to help sort things out. We can discuss options for your return home then. It wasn't an offer. It was a declaration. He was coming to dismantle the independence I'd worked so hard to establish. And with my mother's health in question, my roommate's situation collapsing, and my work performance under scrutiny, I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight him anymore. The week leading up to my father's visit was a slow-motion train wreck. My mother's tests revealed stage 2 lung cancer, treatable but requiring immediate surgery and chemotherapy. She insisted she didn't need me to come home, that my father was handling everything, but her voice trembled when she tried to sound reassuring. At work, the project for the sustainable clothing brand hit major complications when the client suddenly changed their target demographic, rendering much of our design approach obsolete. The temporary supervising designer, Martin, made it clear he considered this a failure of research rather than an unpredictable client shift. "We should have anticipated their market evolution," he said during a tense team meeting. "The signs were there if anyone had been paying attention." His gaze lingered on me, though the market analysis had been completed before I joined the project. No one contradicted him. The housing search yielded nothing but overpriced studios far from work, or questionable shared situations that felt like steps backward. Each evening, I returned to our soon-to-be demolished apartment and applied for places I couldn't afford or wouldn't want to live in, the rejection emails accumulating in my inbox. By the time my father's text arrived confirming his flight details, I was existing on minimal sleep, maximum caffeine, and the thin edge of constant panic. Part of me wanted to tell him not to come, to handle my own problems. A more insidious part wondered if he was right, if trying to make it on my own had been naive hubris. The morning of my father's arrival, I went into the office early to prepare for a client check, in meeting scheduled for 10. At 9:15, Laurel called me into her office, her expression grave. "Gabriella, I need to speak with you about a concerning development." My heart sank. "What's happened?" "Your father came by the office this morning. He requested a meeting with me regarding your position here." The room seemed to tilt. "He's in Seattle already? What did he want?" "He expressed concerns about your emotional state. He suggested you might need some time off, or a leave of absence, to address what he called personal stability issues." Humiliation burned through me. "And you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe," Laurel said carefully. "What I know is that a parent showing up at their adult child's workplace to discuss their employment is highly irregular and raises questions about professional boundaries. I never asked him to come here. I didn't even know he was in town yet." Nevertheless, his presence and his comments, combined with some recent performance concerns raised by Martin, have created a complicated situation. "Martin has had it out for me since Diana left," I protested. "That's a serious accusation," Laurel said, her voice cooling, "and not one that helps your case." She slid a document across her desk. "We're placing you on paid administrative leave for 1 week while we evaluate the situation. This isn't disciplinary action, but we need to ensure there are no underlying issues affecting the workplace." I stared at the paper, unable to process the words. "You're suspending me because my father showed up uninvited? We're giving you paid time to sort out whatever is happening in your personal life that's led to this point. We value your contributions, Gabriella, but we need to maintain a professional environment." I signed the document mechanically, collected my personal items under the watchful eyes of HR, and was escorted from the building before most of my colleagues had arrived. The humiliation was complete. Outside, the Seattle rain had finally made its appearance, falling in a steady, soaking drizzle that matched my mood perfectly. I walked 6 blocks before realizing I had nowhere to go. My apartment was empty, my roommates at work. Amy was on a business trip to Portland. I couldn't face a coffee shop where I might have to make small talk or explain my mid-morning departure from the office. Finally, I ducked into the Seattle Public Library downtown, found a quiet corner, and let the tears come. Everything I'd built was crumbling. My father had won, after all. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "At the hotel. Dinner tonight at 7? We need to talk about your situation." I didn't respond immediately, too angry and devastated to trust myself not to say something unforgivable. Instead, I called Dr. Patel's office and begged for an emergency session, explaining through barely controlled tears that my father had appeared in Seattle and effectively gotten me suspended from my job. Dr. Patel rearranged her schedule to see me that afternoon. In her calm office, with its muted colors and comfortable chairs, I poured out everything: my mother's diagnosis, the housing crisis, the work suspension, My father's interference. It feels like he orchestrated this whole collapse, I said, pacing the small room. Like he wanted me to fail so badly that he made it happen. Do you believe your father consciously set out to sabotage you? Dr. Patel asked. I stopped pacing. No, not consciously. I think he genuinely believes he's protecting me. But his version of protection is control. And when I rejected that control by moving away, he had to prove he was right about me needing him. That's an insightful analysis, she said. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? He's won. My job is in jeopardy. I have nowhere to live, and my mom is sick. Maybe I should just go back to Pennsylvania. Is that what you want? The question hung in the air. Was it what I wanted? To return to my parents' house, to the suffocating expectations and constant disapproval, to give up on the life I'd started building for myself? No, I said finally. It's not what I want. But I don't see another option. There are always options, Gabriella. They might not be easy ones, but they exist. Dr. Patel leaned forward. Your father is in town. You have a dinner scheduled. What if you use that opportunity to set clear boundaries? The thought was terrifying. In 26 years, I'd never successfully stood up to my father. His personality was too overwhelming, his certainty too absolute. He'd dismiss my concerns, reframe my perspective, twist my words until I doubted my own memories. I don't think I can do that, I admitted. Can't, or haven't yet, Dr. Patel asked. You've been playing by his rules your entire life. What would happen if you changed the game? I met my father at a restaurant of my choosing, a moderately priced place near Pike Place Market, public enough that neither of us would make a scene but private enough for a real conversation. He was already seated when I arrived, studying the menu with the same intensity he brought to business contracts. Gabriella, he said, standing as I approached. He moved as if to hug me, then seemed to reconsider at my expression. You look tired. Being ambushed at my workplace will do that, I said, sitting down. He frowned. I was trying to help. Your employer should be aware if you're going through a difficult time. By suggesting I need a leave of absence for stability issues? How exactly is that helping? Your mother is ill. Your housing situation is precarious. These are significant stressors that affect job performance. A compassionate employer would understand that. A compassionate father would respect boundaries, I countered, surprising myself with my directness. You had no right to go to my workplace. He waved this away. Let's focus on solutions. I've looked at flights back to Pennsylvania on Sunday. There's a marketing position open at Wilson & Associates that would be perfect for you. Less specialized than pure design, but more stable. You can stay with us until you find an apartment, though with your mother's treatments, it might be better if you stay longer to help out. It was all arranged, all decided. My life neatly packaged and handed back to me, with no input required or desired from me. The familiar suffocation began closing in. I'm not moving back to Pennsylvania, I said quietly. He continued as if I hadn't spoken. Your mother will appreciate having you nearby during her recovery, and frankly, I could use the support too. This hasn't been easy for any of us. Dad, I said more firmly, I'm not moving back. Now he paused, looking at me with genuine surprise. Don't be impractical, Gabriella. Your job here is in jeopardy. Yes, I know about the administrative leave. Your apartment building is being sold. Your mother is seriously ill. Coming home is the only sensible option. No, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's the option you want, not the one I want. Want? He scoffed. Since when are adult decisions based on what we want rather than what's necessary? Necessary for whom? For you to regain control of my life? For you to prove you were right about me failing? His face flushed. That's unfair and untrue. Everything I've done has been to help you. Really? Sending me money I never asked for, then telling family I can't support myself? Monitoring my bank accounts? Contacting my landlord and my employer behind my back? How exactly is any of that helping me? You're twisting the situation, he said, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. I've been trying to provide a safety net while you pursue this creative path. But the reality is, that path has led exactly where I predicted, to instability and insecurity. The only instability in my life right now is coming from you, I said. My job was going well until you interfered. I was finding my way. Your supervisor seems to disagree, he countered. She was quite concerned about your recent performance. After you planted those concerns? After you suggested I needed leave for emotional issues? We were both leaning forward now, voices low but intense, the dinner menu forgotten. This isn't productive, my father said eventually, straightening. You're upset, understandably. Let's take a step back. I have meetings tomorrow, but we can talk again Saturday morning. You'll have had time to think more rationally about your options by then. That dismissal, the assumption that my perspective was emotional rather than rational, that given time I would come around to his way of thinking, was so familiar it almost made me laugh. It had worked my entire life. Why wouldn't he expect it to work now? But something had shifted within me. Perhaps it was Dr. Patel's question about changing the game. Perhaps it was the culmination of months of therapy helping me recognize the patterns. Perhaps it was simply that I had nothing left to lose. I won't be meeting you Saturday, I said, gathering my purse. I won't be moving back to Pennsylvania, and I won't be accepting any more help that comes with strings attached. I stood up, ignoring his startled expression. Your mother needs you, he said, his final card. My mother needs proper medical care and a husband who supports her instead of controlling her. I'll be in touch with her directly about how I can help from here. I took a deep breath. Goodbye, Dad. Have a safe flight home. I walked out of the restaurant into the rainy evening, expecting to feel guilty or anxious. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had no job security, no housing security, and 1,000 problems to solve. But for the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my father, and the world hadn't ended. My phone buzzed with a text from Jess. Are you okay? Heard about work situation. I have an idea about housing. Call me. Perhaps the game was changing after all. Jess's housing idea was unexpected but immediately appealing. Her cousin owned a small carriage house behind his main residence in the Wallingford neighborhood. He had been using it as a short-term rental, but the current tenants were leaving at the end of the month, and he was considering taking it off the market for renovations. It's tiny, Jess warned when she showed me the place the next day. Like, seriously tiny. But it's a standalone unit with its own entrance, and Nathan would give you a good deal for the first few months if you're interested. The carriage house was indeed small, essentially a studio with a lofted sleeping area, a compact kitchen, and a bathroom that barely fit a shower stall. But it was clean, charming with its exposed beams and large windows, and most importantly, it was mine alone. No roommates, no shared spaces, no complicated dynamics. It's perfect, I told Jess. If Nathan's willing to rent to someone on administrative leave, I'm interested. He's my cousin. I vouched for you. That's enough for him, she said with a shrug. Besides, it's just temporary until you sort things out with work. Sorting things out with work seemed increasingly complicated. After my dinner confrontation with my father, I'd returned to my soon-to-be former apartment and spent hours drafting a detailed email to Laurel. I explained my father's history of interference, his unauthorized contact with my workplace, and my commitment to maintaining appropriate professional boundaries going forward. I didn't ask for my suspension to be lifted, that felt too presumptuous, but I did request the opportunity to prove myself based on my work alone, not my father's misrepresentations. Laurel's response was non-committal but not unkind. Thank you for your candor. We'll discuss this when your administrative leave concludes next week. In the meantime, I had a week of unexpected free time and a determination not to waste it feeling sorry for myself. I signed a month lease on the carriage house, arranged to move my limited belongings from the old apartment, and started reaching out to contacts in Seattle's design community for potential freelance work as a backup plan. Amy returned from Portland and was appropriately outraged on my behalf about both my father's interference and Northwest Design Collective's reaction. They should have had your back, she insisted over coffee near her apartment. Your dad basically committed workplace harassment and they punished you for it. I don't think they saw it that way, I said. From their perspective, I'm the common denominator in a series of unprofessional situations. Still, they could have handled it better. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. Though I have to say, standing up to your dad was a boss move. I'm impressed. It was terrifying, I admitted. But also liberating, Like I've been carrying this weight my whole life without realizing how heavy it was until I put it down. What about your mom? Have you talked to her since everything went down? I nodded. She's upset that Dad and I fought, but also strangely supportive of me staying in Seattle. I think she's been reconsidering some things in her own life since the cancer diagnosis. Heavy stuff, Amy said, but you're handling it like a champion. I wasn't so sure about that, but I appreciated her confidence. In reality, I was taking things 1 hour at a time, trying not to get overwhelmed by the uncertainty ahead. During my therapy session that week, Dr. Patel suggested something unexpected. Have you considered reaching out to your aunt, your father's sister? The thought had crossed my mind, but it seemed impossible. I wouldn't even know how to find her. You mentioned she was an artist, possibly in the Seattle area. Have you tried searching for her online? That evening, I sat in my new tiny home and typed Elaine Porter Artist Seattle into my laptop. The results were immediate and surprising. Elaine Porter was not just an artist, she was the artistic director of a small but respected gallery in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, specializing in emerging Pacific Northwest talents. I stared at her photograph on the gallery's website. The resemblance was still there. Though she was now in her late 50s, her dark hair streaked with gray laugh lines around her eyes. According to her bio, she had been with the gallery for 15 years, after previous work as an independent artist and arts educator. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent an email to the gallery's contact address, marked for her attention. I kept it simple. I believed we were related. I had recently moved to Seattle, and I would appreciate the opportunity to meet her if she was willing. I didn't expect an immediate response. I certainly didn't expect a phone call the next morning. Is this Gabriella Porter? The voice was warm with a hint of rasp. Yes, this is she. This is Elaine Porter. I received your email. A pause. You're Frank's daughter? Yes, I said, my heart racing. You're my aunt? My father's sister? I am. Another pause. I've wondered about you over the years. And your brother Jake, is it? You knew about us? I've kept loose tabs on Frank from a distance. It's complicated, she sighed. Would you like to meet for coffee? I have some time this afternoon if that works for you. We arranged to meet at a cafe near her gallery. I arrived early, nervous and uncertain what to expect. Would she look at me and see my father? Would she resent me for being part of the family that had apparently rejected her? I recognized her immediately when she walked in. The same walk as my father, purposeful, but with a fluidity he lacked. She spotted me just as quickly, her eyes widening slightly. The Porter genes run strong, she said as she sat down across from me. You could have been me at your age. That's what started all this, I admitted. I found an old photo of you with my dad. No one had ever told me he had a sister. Elaine nodded, unsurprised. Frank would have preferred to erase me completely. In his mind, I betrayed the family. By becoming an artist? By choosing my own path instead of the one my father, your grandfather, laid out for us. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. The construction business was supposed to be a family legacy. When Frank embraced it and I didn't, the division was inevitable. My father told everyone you failed, I said, that your art career ended in financial disaster. Elaine laughed, a genuine sound of amusement rather than bitterness. Is that the story? Interesting. I won't pretend it was easy. There were lean years, certainly. Times when I questioned my choices. But failure? She gestured to herself. I own my home. I run a respected gallery. I've shown my work in exhibitions across the country. Most importantly, I've lived authentically. By my own standards, that's success. I think that's why he couldn't accept my interest in design, I said. I remind him of you. And how did you end up in Seattle, of all places? Did you know I was here? I told her everything. My move for the design job, my father's interference, the current suspension, the housing changes. She listened intently, asking occasional questions, but mostly absorbing the story with a thoughtful expression. History repeats itself, she said when I finished. Frank hasn't changed at all. What happened between you two? Really? Elena sighed. The official version, the one your father probably believes, is that I abandoned the family business to pursue a selfish artistic dream, cut ties with my father when he rightfully criticized my choices, and ended up struggling while Frank built a successful company. And the real version? I recognized early that I didn't belong in construction. I had different talents, different interests. My father couldn't accept that. His vision of family unity required conformity to his plan. When I pursued art school instead of business school, he threatened to cut me off financially. When that didn't change my mind, he became emotionally manipulative, using my mother's disappointment, Frank's loyalty, community expectations, anything to make me fall in line. The parallels to my own experience were chilling. Frank was the perfect son, dutiful, practical, ambitious in the right ways. He absorbed our father's values completely. When I left home, it confirmed everything our father had warned him about, that art leads to poverty, that family loyalty is all that matters, that deviation from the approved path brings destruction. So my father thinks he's protecting me by pushing me away from design? Exactly. In his mind, he's saving you from my fate, a fate he's completely misunderstood or misrepresented. Elaine leaned forward. The irony is, I wasn't even asking to be supported financially through some bohemian lifestyle. I wanted to study graphic design at a respected school. I wanted to build a career in the arts that would be stable and fulfilling. But to my father and to yours, art couldn't be practical or sustainable. It had to be a frivolous indulgence. We talked for hours, Elaine filling in gaps in my family history that helped me understand my father's rigid worldview. She didn't excuse his behavior, but provided context that made his motivations less mysterious. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, offered genuinely helpful advice about navigating Seattle's design community, and never once suggested I should give up and go home. As our meeting drew to a close, she hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to see the gallery? It's just around the corner, and we're featuring a young photographer whose work might interest you." The gallery was small but beautifully curated, with excellent lighting and a warmth often missing from more prestigious spaces. Elaine introduced me to her assistant and gave me a tour of the current exhibition, explaining her curatorial choices with obvious passion and expertise. "We focus on artists who might not get visibility in larger galleries," she explained. "Often women, people of color, artists with unusual backgrounds or approaches. The art world can be as rigid in its way as the business world." "It's amazing," I said sincerely. "You've built something wonderful here." "It took time," she said, "and resilience, and a willingness to define success on my own terms." She turned to face me directly. "The hardest lesson for me was learning that I couldn't make my father or brother understand my choices. Their approval wasn't available to me, no matter what I achieved. Once I accepted that and stopped seeking it, I found freedom to build a life that made sense to me." "I'm not sure I'm there yet," I admitted. "Part of me still wants my father to see that I can succeed in design, to prove him wrong." "That's natural," she said gently. "Just be careful not to let that need for validation dictate your choices. The best revenge, if you want one, is a life well lived on your own terms." Before I left, Elaine handed me her card with her personal number written on the back. "Family is complicated," she said, "but you have one here in Seattle if you want it." That night, I called my brother Jake and told him everything about meeting Elaine, about her real story, about the parallels between her experience and mine. His shocked silence spoke volumes. "Dad lied about her," he said finally. "All these years." "Not necessarily lied," I said, trying to be fair. "Maybe believed what he needed to believe. That's almost more dangerous. And now he's doing the same thing to you." Jake sounded troubled. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have done more." "You're seeing it now," I said. "That matters." "I'll talk to him," Jake promised. "Not that he listens to anyone, but I'll try." "Be careful," I warned. "If you push too hard, you might find yourself on the outside too." "Maybe that's where I need to be," Jake said, "at least for a while." By the end of my administrative leave week, I had made significant changes. I was settled in the carriage house, had applied for several freelance opportunities as a backup plan, had connected with my long-lost aunt, and had begun rebuilding my confidence through therapy and supportive friends. I still didn't know if I had a job to return to, but I was determined to face whatever came next on my own terms. The Sunday night before I was due to return to Northwest Design Collective, I received a surprising email from Diana Morris, my mentor who had been on personal leave. "Gabriella, I'm back in town and heard what happened. I'd like to meet before you go into the office tomorrow. Breakfast at Oddfellows at 7:30? It's important, Diana. I replied immediately, agreeing to the meeting. Whatever was coming next, I was ready to face it. Diana was already seated when I arrived at Oddfellows Cafe, 2 cups of coffee on the table and a serious expression on her face. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wanted to talk to you before you went into the office today. Is everything okay? Your family emergency?" "My mother had a fall, but she's recovering well. Thank you for asking." She pushed one of the coffee cups toward me, but that's not why I asked to meet. Laurel filled me in on what happened while I was gone. I tensed, unsure whether Diana would see the situation from my perspective or the company's. "I need to know your side of the story," she continued. "The complete version, not the office gossip version." So I told her everything. My father's history of undermining my creative pursuits, his unexpected appearance at the office, the misrepresentations, the suspension, and even my discovery of my aunt and the family history that had shaped my father's attitudes. Diana listened without interruption, occasionally nodding. When I finished, she sat back, studying me thoughtfully. "That's consistent with what Laurel told me, though, with more context." She tapped her fingers on the table, a habit I recognized from our work sessions. "Here's where things stand. Martin has recommended terminating your employment, citing personal instability affecting the workplace." My heart sank. "And Laurel agrees?" "Laurel is conflicted. Your email to her was compelling, but she's concerned about the disruption. She's asked for my input since we worked closely together." "And what do you think?" I asked, bracing for the worst. "I think Martin is an insecure designer who feels threatened by younger talent, particularly female talent. I think your father's behavior was inappropriate and concerning, but not reflective of your professionalism, and I think we'd be making a serious mistake letting you go." Relief washed over me. "Thank you for believing in me." "Don't thank me yet. Keeping your position won't be simple." Diana leaned forward. "The sustainable clothing brand client specifically asked about you last week. They liked your presentation and your design approach. They were confused about why you were suddenly removed from the project." "What did Martin tell them?" "Some vague explanation about team restructuring." Diana smiled slightly. "They weren't convinced. In fact, they requested that you be brought back onto the project." "Seriously?" "Apparently, your understanding of their brand values made an impression. So here's what I'm proposing. You complete the sustainable clothing brand project under my direct supervision. No interference from Martin. If the client is satisfied with the final work, that should neutralize the arguments against your continued employment." "I can do that," I said, confidence returning. "One more thing," Diana said. "I need your assurance that your father won't appear at the office again. I've made it clear to him that his interference is unacceptable. I don't think he'll try again, but I can't control his actions entirely." "Fair enough. But if he does attempt contact, you need to inform me or Laurel immediately so we can handle it appropriately." "Agreed." Diana nodded, apparently satisfied. "Let's head in together. I've scheduled a meeting with Laurel at 9 to formalize this arrangement." The return to Northwest Design Collective was uncomfortable, but not the disaster I had feared. Martin was coldly professional, Laurel cautiously supportive, and most of my colleagues seemed unaware of the details behind my absence. Diana's public endorsement sent a clear message that I had her confidence, which carried significant weight in the office hierarchy. The sustainable clothing brand project became my singular focus. I worked longer hours than ever, polishing concepts, refining presentations, and anticipating client needs before they were expressed. Diana provided guidance without micromanaging, stepping in only when necessary and giving me credit for my contributions in client meetings. "You've found your voice," she told me, after a particularly successful presentation 3 weeks into my return. "Not just in your design work, but in how you communicate it. That confidence makes all the difference." Meanwhile, my personal life continued its transformation. I settled into the tiny carriage house, making it truly mine with secondhand furniture and artwork that included a small original painting gifted by my Aunt Elaine. We met regularly for coffee or gallery visits, building a relationship that felt both familial and professional. She became a mentor in navigating the Seattle arts community. My mother's cancer treatment began in earnest. We spoke almost daily, her voice growing stronger as she took more control of her medical decisions and gradually other aspects of her life. "Your father is seeing a therapist," she told me during one call, her tone suggesting she could hardly believe it herself. "He won't admit it's therapy, he calls it executive coaching, but it's a start." "What prompted that?" I asked, surprised. "Jake, believe it or not. They had a serious conversation after you stood your ground in Seattle, and I think your father's been doing some reflecting since then." Jake confirmed this in our weekly video calls. "I told him I was considering leaving the company," he admitted, "that I needed to figure out if I was there, because I wanted to be or because it was expected." He didn't take it well initially, but it got him thinking. "Are you really considering leaving?" I asked. "I don't know yet, but I needed the freedom to ask the question." He smiled. "Something I learned from my brave little sister." As my 3-month probationary period following the suspension approached its conclusion, Laurel called me into her office. Diana joined us, her expression giving nothing away. "We've been reviewing your performance since your return," Laurel began formally. "The sustainable clothing brand client has provided exceptionally positive feedback about your work and specifically mentioned your contribution to their recent launch." "Thank you," I said. "It's been a challenging but rewarding project." "Diana has also noted your consistent professionalism and growth during this period." Laurel glanced at Diana, who nodded in confirmation. "In light of this, we're lifting the probationary status and confirming your continued employment with Northwest Design Collective." Relief flooded through me, though I maintained my professional composure. "I appreciate the opportunity to prove myself." Additionally, Diana added, "We'd like to assign you as lead designer on an upcoming project for a nonprofit arts organization. The budget is modest, but it offers significant creative freedom and aligns with your personal interests." The name of the nonprofit caused me to catch my breath. It was the gallery my Aunt Elaine directed. "Is something wrong?" Laurel asked, noticing my reaction. "No," I said quickly. "I'm familiar with the organization. It's excellent." Diana smiled knowingly. "I thought it might be a good fit. Of course, you'll need to disclose any personal connection to ensure there's no conflict of interest." I nodded, mentally composing the disclosure form I would submit regarding my relationship with Elaine. The fact that Diana was suggesting this project despite knowing there would be a connection indicated her level of trust in my professional judgment. Outside the office, I took a moment to absorb what had happened. Not only had I retained my job, but I had been given a project that bridged my professional skills with my personal connections, a true vote of confidence. That evening, I called my mother to share the good news. After congratulating me, she hesitated. "Your father would like to speak with you, if you're willing." I tensed automatically, then made a conscious decision to remain open. "Put him on." "Gabriella." My father's voice sounded different, less commanding, more uncertain. "Congratulations on your project's success. Your mother told me about it." "Thank you," I said, waiting for the qualifier, the subtle undermining that usually followed any praise. Instead, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "I've been speaking with Jake and thinking about some things. I may have mishandled aspects of your career choice." Coming from my father, this vague acknowledgement was the equivalent of a full apology and admission of wrongdoing. I remained silent, letting him continue. "I've recently reconnected with Elaine," he said, surprising me completely. After 25 years of silence, Jake encouraged it. "She seems, well, established in her field." "She is," I confirmed. "Very respected in the Seattle arts community." "Yes, well." He cleared his throat again. "She mentioned you've met, that you two have been spending time together." "We have." "That's good. Family is important, even when we disagree." The irony of this statement after years of him erasing Elaine from our family history was almost too much, but I recognized the effort this conversation required from him. "We're thinking of visiting Seattle," he continued. "Your mother and I. Once her first round of treatment concludes, if that would be acceptable to you." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. "Not at my workplace, though." A short, surprised laugh escaped him. "No, definitely not at your workplace. That was a mistake on my part." We talked for a few more minutes, stilted, careful conversation, but without the usual pattern of him telling me what to do or think. When we hung up, I sat in my tiny carriage house, marveling at how much had changed in less than a year. 1 year later, I stood in my Aunt Elaine's gallery, watching people circulate through the opening night of a special exhibition, one that featured works from emerging designers combining graphic elements with fine art. One piece in the show was mine, a mixed media work that incorporated elements of the branding I'd developed for the nonprofit arts organization, transformed into a personal artistic statement. The exhibition had been Elaine's idea, a way to showcase the intersection of commercial design and personal artistic expression. Diana had encouraged me to participate, even helping me carve out time to develop my piece while maintaining my growing client portfolio at Northwest Design Collective. I'd moved from the carriage house to a small but bright apartment closer to work. I'd been promoted to senior designer after the successful completion of several high-profile projects. I'd developed a circle of friends and professional contacts throughout Seattle's creative community, and I'd maintained boundaries with my father that allowed for a relationship on more equal terms. The gallery buzzed with conversation and appreciation. I was discussing my process with an interested couple when I heard a familiar voice behind me. There she is. I turned to find my father standing with my mother and Jake. They had arrived in Seattle the previous day for the exhibition opening. My mother looked healthier than she had in years, her cancer in remission and a new spark in her eyes. Jake had indeed left the family construction business temporarily to explore other interests, though he remained on good terms with our father. And my father himself seemed somehow smaller, less imposing, still confident, but without the crushing certainty that had defined him throughout my childhood. "What do you think?" I asked, gesturing around the gallery. "It's impressive," he said, looking somewhat out of place but making a visible effort. "Elaine has built something remarkable here." He turned to my piece on the wall. "And your work?" "It's very good, Gabriella. I may not understand all of it, but I can see the skill and thought behind it." Coming from my father, this was extraordinary praise. I accepted it with a nod, neither dismissing it nor overvaluing it. My sense of worth no longer depended on his approval. As the evening progressed, I watched my aunt and my father navigate their rekindled relationship, not close, not entirely comfortable, but respectful in a way that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. My mother engaged enthusiastically with other artists, showing genuine interest in their work and process. Jake moved easily between family members and strangers, his natural charisma now employed in building connections rather than fulfilling expectations. And I stood in the center of it all, not taking up space, but creating it. Space for authentic self-expression. Space for complex family relationships. Space for a career that honored both practical realities and creative passion. Space for a life defined by my own standards of success. The journey had been painful, the confrontations difficult, the revelations sometimes shattering. But standing in that gallery surrounded by my work, my chosen community, and my evolving family, I understood that the most important space I'd created was within myself, the space to define my own worth, independent of anyone else's measuring stick. Have you ever had to create space for yourself in a world that tried to make you smaller? How did you find the strength to stand up for your own path when others tried to redirect you? Comment below and share your story. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about finding your voice, and share with someone who might be struggling to define success on their own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, creating your own space isn't selfish. It's the most necessary act of self-respect you can offer yourself.